Hi, Heather. Welcome to Tax Class.
Thank you for having me.
You're a VIP in Canadian Tax. You're the Executive Director and CEO of the Canadian Tax Foundation, which is the most important tax organization in Canada and maybe the world. And you're running the show over there, and you agreed to come and talk to my students today about careers in tax. Who better than you to tell them about interesting career paths?
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here, and you embarrass me with your accolades. But one of the things I really do love most about my job is the opportunity to talk about tax, especially to talk to students, because it is a fantastic career, and I'm really excited to share with them some of my thoughts.
It is a fantastic career, and we are in the most fortunate position when we get to talk to students because they're new and they're young and full of life, and it's wonderful. So let's start at the beginning, though. Let's start with your fascinating career path. Tell us all about you.
Well, thank you. So I am a tax lawyer by training. So after I finished law school, I articled at a firm in Toronto and spent a few years there as an associate. And even though, no offense, Allison, I did not enjoy tax that much when I first encountered it at law school, I was quickly converted. So I had a summer job between second and third year where I did a fair bit of tax. And to my surprise, I really, really loved it. So I went back and took more courses in third year and ended up articling at that firm and going back as an associate and joined their tax department. And it was fantastic and learned so much in my early years. It's really just incredible how much there is to learn. And after a number of years practicing law, for a bunch of different reasons, I decided to move to one of the big four. And that was less common then than it is now. And that was really driven by a few trends that I saw in the profession. One was the increased specialization. And at that time, it was very hard for law firms, especially small law firms, to specialize. So subspecialties within tax. And then globalization. So we were seeing increasing amounts of cross-border issues. And again, the big four seemed to be sort of well connected in terms of building their networks in a way that the law firms then were not. And I had a lot of clients with international tax issues. So I ended up moving to Deloitte. I was there for almost 20 years. My last 5 years before I retired, I was the national managing partner of tax for the firm, which was a lot of fun. I sat on our global executive and the firm's board. And then I went to the Canadian Tax Foundation, where I have very happily been, leading things for the last 5 years.
Okay, so you did what a lot of students do, which is you discovered tax. You weren't born a tax lawyer. You didn't go to law school thinking you're going to be a tax lawyer. So what kind of lawyer were you going to be?
That's a good question. So when I went to law school in second year, tax was mandatory. And so I had no choice. Everyone had to take tax. And now that I reflect back on it, what a fortunate thing that was, because even if I didn't want to be a tax lawyer, as you know, Allison, tax is everywhere. Whether you're a family lawyer or a corporate lawyer, like it affects so many things. So it's good to have that working knowledge. But I was going to probably be focused on corporate finance or securities law. So this was a time when the markets are really hot, and that was the sexy area to practice. And the firm I was at was a business law firm. And, I really enjoyed that work. But I found that the tax was just so interesting, right? And so fascinating. And no disrespect to securities lawyers, but our statute is way bigger than the Securities Act.
Yeah, we have more pages to work with. That's
right.
Yeah. So you alluded to trends that are going on in the world when you were working through law firms in the big four. Tell us about whether that's changed.
So I would say those trends were early then, and now they're very pronounced. So definitely globalization. So, law is reflective of clients and the economy and government decisions and circumstances, and those change and evolve. But globalization has been a very pronounced trend. So even within a fairly small mid-market economy like Canada, most clients of any size will have international tax issues. Yeah. And whether that's a corporation that's expanding outside of Canada, or a family who has a US citizen that they need to include in their estate planning. And those issues have just become more pronounced. The other one that I mentioned, the other trend is specialization. So when I first started practicing law, you were a tax lawyer and you sort of covered the waterfront in terms of tax. And now, of course, within a tax practice of any size whatsoever, you have specialization, whether it's international tax or transfer pricing or estate planning. The issues are unique and different. And so I think that trend is with us. If anything, the world of tax has become more complex. And the other interesting trend that really was not started then, but is very big now, of course, is transparency. So there's very interesting issues around disclosure and client information being in the public domain globally within Canada. And so the role of a tax lawyer to assist clients in being compliant, in making those disclosures, and then navigating and helping them through any controversies that may ensue. That whole dispute resolution area has become much more at the forefront than it was even 5 or 10 years ago.
I love that area. It's such a fascinating mix of procedure and negotiation, mediation, and then the sort of technical law interpretation. You mix all that together. And I think that's probably why a lot of people like tax law because of that, right? You can specialize to a point where you're just the technical person if that's what you want. But you can also be that person that has a more general practice, and tax is one of the aspects.
Exactly. And it's multidisciplinary, which is really rewarding. And, every client's tax issues are slightly different. So you're always learning new things and encountering novel issues, which I think makes for a really rewarding career. I mean, boredom is never really going to be a risk in a tax practice. There's always some new adventure just around the corner.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, as executive director and CEO at the Canadian Tax Foundation, you can really speak to the trends. They come out in the scholarship. They reveal themselves in the pages of the Canadian Tax Journal. And you also see the interesting areas that people want to have workshops and conferences and so on. So I wonder if you would talk a little bit about how younger people who may not really understand, why do we need a Canadian Tax Foundation? Like, what's the role of that? Or like, how might you get involved in that if you were a student sort of just jumping into tax, breaking into the profession? What is the Canadian Tax Foundation to you, and how should you leverage it?
That's a really good question. So I'll give you just 30-second advertorial, if you will. The Canadian Tax Foundation has 3 mandates. They're tax education, tax policy, and tax research. We're a registered charity. We rely on our many, many awesome volunteers to help us do what we do, which is publish everything from the Canadian Tax Journal to treatises on specific topics. We run a series of conferences, and we support academic research as well, which is a really critical part of our mandate. And we liaise with government. We do not advocate, we do not lobby. What we do is we provide a forum for interested, educated, well-informed stakeholders to come together and discuss and debate important issues around public policy, finance, and taxation in Canada and around the world. And it's really, that's our key role, is to drive those informed debates and discussions so Canada ends up in a better place. So you may say, how is this relevant for me as a student? So we, as I mentioned, rely upon volunteers, and we have over 13,000 members across Canada. So basically every practicing tax lawyer, accountant, government officials, people in industry, and tax professors are our members. And what we do for students is we basically help them get established. So we have amazing resources in terms of helping you do research, whether you're a law student, whether you're articling, or as an associate or partner at a firm. And our librarians provide free research and support. We have an amazing library, a physical library, one of the biggest in the world. But in these days, and even before these days, we do a lot of outreach, digitization, access to online resources, TaxFind, which has about 50 years of tax research. That's our online tool. And at our conferences, we provide opportunities to write papers, to speak and present them. A way to build your profile, build your career, become known in the tax community to clients and to referring sources. And we also, for your first 10 years of practice, we have a young practitioner program that now has well over a dozen chapters across Canada, where people who are early to their tax careers can get together and organize events, discussion groups, study groups, just really create their own communities of interest within their local markets and help one another advance. And that's one of the unique things about the tax bar that I really love, is people are very collegial and very helpful. There's a recognition that it's not easy, but it's a lot of fun and it's very rewarding, and we can all help each other and improve the quality of what we all do for clients and for the tax community. So it's kind of fun being able to stimulate all of that. And for students, I should also add, we have cash prizes for student papers. So get your professors to nominate you, and you too could win some cash.
Very good pitch. The only thing you forgot to mention that the Canadian Tax Foundation does is they also have blogs.
Oh yes. And one, Allison Christians, I believe, might have one of those blogs on digital tax. Yes, exactly. Another topical item.
And there are others. And I think one of the reasons I was interested in producing that blog with students, I might add, for Canadian Tax Foundation is that it's one way to get scholarship out into the universe on
Yes.
a more efficient timeline,
Yes.
shall we say.
Yes. So I would say that that's a really good point. So the Canadian Tax Journal is one of the most prestigious tax journals in the world, peer reviewed and all those good things, but it takes time
Yeah.
to get through all of the various editorial processes and the peer reviews. So getting something more quickly to market is really critical. So hence the blogs. And we do newsletters too. We have a newsletter every month. And for many students, that's a way to establish themselves. One of our newsletters is focused on young practitioners, and the writing there is fantastic. It's as good as anything we publish. So you're absolutely right. There's different ways to get out there these days.
I love that you mentioned that, and I'll add the links to those sites to this video so that students can go down below and see and follow those links to go find the newsletter and find the blogs and so on. And I think the last thing I'd like to get your thoughts on is that sometimes people think that tax law is for a certain kind of person.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably wrong, but
So it depends what you mean by that kind of person. I would say it is for a certain kind of person, and that would be a smart, curious person.
yeah.
Right? And so anybody can be that person from various backgrounds. The tax bar is a lot more diverse than it used to be. There's a long ways to go. But when I look at the contingent of young lawyers and accountants who are coming into the practice of tax, it's really encouraging because they're really smart, really motivated, and they challenge the received ways of doing things, which I think is really healthy, whether that's the business model of law firms or how you serve clients, how you build a practice. I think that's all great. And the one, I think, positive thing about all this change that we're seeing is that it means that for newer people entering the profession, they're not that far behind, right? The head start that people may have had some time ago has really kind of been reduced because of all this avalanche of legislative change that we've seen in the last number of years. So I think there's a great opportunity. There really aren't enough tax lawyers out there, in my opinion, and they're hard to find. And so I think it's a great career path.
I got to agree with you. It's been a great career path for me and for a lot of people I know. And it's just nice to know that somebody who's as thoughtful as you and interested in all the different dimensions of the tax law is in charge of this environment and has such a role to play. So thank you so much for your thoughts on tax, careers in tax, the tax profession, and the changing world we live in.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it. And I will just conclude with saying, I do love tax law. So,
Yes, that's the correct ending. Thank you.
excellent.